Jackie Gleason once sat down at Toots Shores, ordered a full Chateaubriand meant for two, finished every bite, and asked what else was on the menu. The man treated eating like a contact sport he refused to lose. He weighed nearly 300 pounds at his peak, performed live television on a full stomach, and turned every restaurant in Manhattan and Miami Beach into a personal challenge. Number 14 kept showing up by the bucket at his table in Miami. Number 7 came from a Coney Island stand a dozen at a time. And number 1 is the meal nobody alive can confirm he actually finished. The food never stopped, and neither did Gleason, not until his body finally made the decision for him. Hit that subscribe button because what this man put away over a lifetime will change how you look at every plate you have ever pushed aside half-finished. Here are 25 wild meals Jackie Gleason actually ate until his body gave out. Number 25. Late-night Chinese takeout by the bagful. Gleason was famous in Manhattan for calling Chinese restaurants after midnight and ordering enough food for a table of 8. He ate it alone in his apartment or his hotel suite, working through container after container of spare ribs, egg rolls, lo mein, shrimp fried rice, and wonton soup while watching television. The delivery staff reportedly assumed they were catering a party. There was no party. It was one man, a pair of chopsticks, and a tower of white cartons that by morning filled an entire trash bin. He did this multiple nights a week for years, and every restaurant in his rotation knew his voice on the phone. Number 24. Double lamb chops at Toots Shores. Toots Shores on West 51st Street in Manhattan was Gleason's second home through the 1950s and 1960s. His standing order was a double portion of thick lamb chops, charred on the outside and pink in the center, served alongside cream spinach and a baked potato loaded with butter and sour cream. He rarely stopped at one round. On a good night, he would order the same plate twice, washing each round down with scotch on the rocks, while Shore himself sat across the table matching him drink for drink. The two men ate and drank like it was a sport, and by some accounts it was. They kept an informal tally of who could outlast the other, and Gleason almost always won. Number 23. Pre-show porterhouse steak and eggs. Before nearly every live taping of the Jackie Gleason show, Gleason sat down to a massive porterhouse steak with 4 fried eggs on the side, a basket of buttered rolls, and a tall glass of orange juice chased with black coffee. This was not breakfast. This was a late afternoon ritual, timed so the food would settle just enough for him to walk onto the stage. The steak was always thick, always rare, and always finished to the bone. Most performers ate light before a show, a sandwich, a cup of soup, maybe nothing at all. Gleason ate like a man fueling up for a 12-round fight, and then went out under the lights and danced. Number 22. A full Thanksgiving spread consumed solo. Gleason's Thanksgiving table was legendary among those who saw it. A whole roasted turkey, a bone-in glazed ham, mashed potatoes, candied sweet potatoes with marshmallows, creamed pearl onions, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce from scratch, dinner rolls, and at least 2 pies, 1 pumpkin and 1 pecan. The wild part was that this spread was often prepared for Gleason and one other person, sometimes just Gleason alone. He treated the holiday as a personal eating marathon, going back to the table across the entire afternoon and evening until every serving dish sat empty and scraped clean. The turkey carcass was stripped bare, the ham was carved down to the bone, the pie tins held nothing but crumbs. Leftovers were not a concept he recognized. What most families spread across 3 or 4 days of reheated plates, Gleason finished in a single sitting. Number 21. Lobster tails by the half dozen. When Gleason moved his show to Miami Beach in 1964, he fell hard for the local seafood. His order at the better restaurants was 6 cold water lobster tails at a time, lined up on a platter with drawn butter in a silver bowl, lemon wedges on the side. He worked through them methodically, cracking and pulling, while telling stories to whoever happened to be sitting at his table. The empty shells piled up like evidence at a crime scene. Waiters at his regular spots reportedly stopped asking how many he wanted and simply brought the full platter the moment he sat down. He dipped every last piece in butter and never left one behind. Number 20. Room service prime rib at any hour. When the Jackie Gleason show traveled or when Gleason was on location for a film, hotel room service became his personal kitchen. His standard order was a full prime rib dinner with Yorkshire pudding, roasted potatoes, creamed horseradish, and a wedge of iceberg lettuce drenched in blue cheese dressing. He ordered it at midnight, at 2 in the morning, at 4 in the morning. The hotel staff in cities across the country learned to keep a prime rib standing by because Gleason's call could come at any time. When the phone rang at 3 in the morning and the voice on the other end asked for a full prime rib with all the sides, the kitchen already knew who it was. The tray that came back was always clean, the plate wiped with bread, and the scotch glass beside it was always empty. Number 19. The steak and scotch diet. There was a period in the late 1950s and early 1960s when Gleason reportedly decided to lose weight, and his version of a diet was to eliminate everything from his daily intake except 2 items, steak and scotch. No bread, no potatoes, no vegetables, no fruit, no dessert, no soup, no salad. Just seared beef and whiskey, consumed in alternating rounds, sometimes for every single meal of the day. He would sit down to a thick, heavily charred New York strip for lunch, order another for dinner, and pour scotch on the rocks in the hours between. By his own reasoning, he was cutting carbohydrates and starches, and the weight would follow. By any medical standard, he was hammering his liver and his digestive system simultaneously with nothing in between to absorb or slow the damage. The weight did not come off. It barely moved. Friends and colleagues who watched this routine play out week after week described it as a man entering into a negotiation with his own body and losing the argument every single day without once considering a different approach. He kept it up for months. The scotch alone, consumed at the volume and frequency Gleason was known for, would have been cause for serious medical concern in any patient. Combined with pounds of heavily seared red meat eaten day after day without a single green vegetable or a piece of fruit or even a glass of water to slow the assault, his digestive system was absorbing a level of punishment that would not appear on a bathroom scale but would eventually appear on a medical chart. When he finally abandoned the experiment, having lost little or nothing, he did not replace the steak and scotch with anything lighter. He simply went back to eating everything else on top of the steak and the scotch, which continued uninterrupted. Nothing was subtracted. The so-called diet simply became the permanent foundation layer beneath an even larger daily intake, and the number on the scale moved in the only direction it was ever going to move. Number 18. Caviar straight from the tin with a soup spoon. Most people associated caviar with small mother-of-pearl spoons and measured portions on toast points. Gleason treated it like peanut butter. He kept tins of beluga in his refrigerator the way other men kept cold cuts, and when the mood struck, he would sit down with a full tin and a large soup spoon and eat it in steady, unhurried bites until the tin was empty. No crackers, no garnish, no lemon, no ceremony. Just a man in a silk robe working through what most restaurants served as a garnish for an entire table. Guests at his home recalled watching him go through a tin that would have cost a working person a full week of groceries, then set the empty container aside and ask what was for dinner. The caviar was never the meal, it was what happened before the meal. Number 17. The 5-hour steakhouse marathon. Gleason did not visit restaurants the way other people did. He arrived, he sat down, and he did not leave. At his favorite steakhouses in New York and later in Miami, a single dinner could stretch past 5 hours without him ever once looking at a watch or asking for a check. The evening would begin with a jumbo shrimp cocktail, the shrimp curved over the rim of a chilled glass, followed by a Caesar salad prepared tableside with raw egg and anchovy. Then, the main event, A porterhouse or a bone-in ribeye, cooked rare, the plate still sizzling when it arrived. If the first steak was good enough, and it usually was, he ordered a second. A mound of creamed spinach appeared alongside it, then a loaded baked potato split open and drowned in butter, then a plate of thick-cut onion rings, golden and stacked in a tower. After the steaks were gone, the dessert arrived, a slab of dense New York cheesecake or a towering wedge of chocolate layer cake, sometimes both. The waitstaff rotated shifts around him. Other diners arrived, ordered, ate, paid their checks, and left. Gleason remained, drinking scotch steadily, holding court at the center of the room, telling stories that made strangers at neighboring tables stop their own conversations to listen. His companions came and went in waves throughout the night. The table looked like the aftermath of a banquet, plates and glasses and silverware stacked 3 deep, bread baskets emptied and refilled and emptied again. And when the bill finally came, Gleason never once looked at the number. He signed it with a flourish, pushed back his chair, and walked out into the night air, his driver already waiting at the curb with the engine running. Number 16. Corned beef sandwiches stacked impossibly high. Gleason loved a proper New York deli sandwich, and his version of corned beef on rye was not what you would find at an ordinary counter. He wanted the meat piled so high that the sandwich could barely hold together, with hot mustard, a sour pickle spear on the side, and a cream soda to wash it down. He could eat 2 of these towering constructions in one sitting, each one packed with what a normal deli would spread across 3 or 4 sandwiches. The bread was almost decorative at that point. It was really just a thin frame around an absurd monument of warm, hand-sliced, cured beef. Number 15. Backstage deli platters meant for the whole cast. The backstage spread at the Jackie Gleason show was not a modest catering tray of rolled cold cuts and water crackers. Gleason insisted on full-scale New York deli platters loaded with hand-sliced pastrami, warm corned beef, smoked turkey breast, rare roast beef, creamy coleslaw, potato salad, half-sour pickles, stacks of fresh rye bread, pumpernickel, and 3 or 4 different types of mustard in little ceramic bowls. The platters were laid out for the entire cast and crew. Cast and crew picked politely at the edges, taking a sandwich here, a pickle there. Gleason stationed himself at the center and worked outward. By showtime, the platters looked like they had been caught in a windstorm, and Gleason walked onto the stage having single-handedly consumed what the caterer had calculated for 20 people. Number 14. Stone crab claws by the bucket. After settling permanently in South Florida, Gleason became one of the most devoted stone crab eaters in Miami. He ordered them by the bucket at Joe's Stone Crab on South Beach and at other seafood institutions across the coast, cracking the heavy claws with a wooden mallet and dipping each piece of sweet white meat into the sharp mustard sauce that is served with them. A single order was never enough. He routinely went through multiple rounds in a single sitting, year after year, for more than 2 decades straight. The shells piled up on the table in a heap that made busboys stop and count. The waiters knew him by name and by appetite, and the kitchen started cracking claws the moment his car pulled into the parking lot. Number 13. An entire roast duck carved at the table for one. When Gleason dined at certain Manhattan restaurants in the 1960s, he occasionally ordered a whole roast duck, not a portion, not a half, the entire bird. The kitchen would send it out on a platter with the skin lacquered and crackling, and a waiter would carve it tableside as if serving a party of 4. Gleason ate every piece himself, working through the legs, the breast, and the wings, pulling meat from the carcass with his fingers when the knife left too much behind. He paired it with roasted potatoes soaked in the rendered fat from the pan and drank scotch alongside it without switching to wine. The other diners watched a single man dismantle what most tables ordered to share, and by the time the bones were cleared, there was nothing left on the platter but grease. Number 12. a full rack of ribs with no utensils. When Gleason ate barbecue, he did not bother with a knife and fork. He picked up the entire rack of pork ribs with both hands and worked through it like a man with somewhere to be, tearing the meat from the bone and reaching for the next section before he had finished chewing the last. Sauce covered his hands, his chin, and the front of whatever shirt or jacket he happened to be wearing. Napkins accumulated beside his plate like sandbags against a flood, each one stained dark red and crumpled into a ball. The rack was always a full slab, never a half order, and if the first one had been good, he ordered a second without hesitation. The bones went back to the kitchen picked so clean they could have been used for stock. Number 11. Veal Parmigiana that hung off the plate. At his favorite Italian restaurants in New York and Miami, Gleason ordered veal Parmigiana, where the cutlet covered the entire plate and hung over the edges. The veal was pounded thin, breaded, fried golden, and then buried under a thick layer of melted mozzarella and house-made marinara. A mountain of spaghetti came alongside it, and he finished both completely. This was not a celebration dinner or a special occasion. This was an ordinary weeknight, the kind of meal most people would split between two plates and still take half home. Gleason cleaned it alone. The waiters brought extra baskets of bread without being asked because they knew Gleason would use every piece to soak up the last traces of sauce and cheese from the plate. When the dish came back to the kitchen, it looked like it had been run through a dishwasher. Number 10. Casino buffet marathons in Las Vegas. When Gleason visited Las Vegas to perform or to gamble, the casino buffets became his personal territory. He moved from station to station, loading plates with carved prime rib, king crab legs, cocktail shrimp, pasta, roasted chicken, and anything else that caught his attention. He was a headliner, and the casinos treated him accordingly, but the sheer volume of food he consumed at a single buffet session left even the kitchen staff watching. He sat for hours, methodically returning to the carving station until the chef behind the counter had to wheel out a fresh roast, and Gleason would nod at him as though they were old friends keeping an appointment. Other guests filled one plate and called it a night. Gleason filled 6 and called it a warm-up. Number 9. Chateaubriand for 1. Chateaubriand is a thick center-cut roast from the beef tenderloin, traditionally prepared and carved tableside for 2 people to share. Gleason ordered it for himself. The full roast, sliced ceremonially by the waiter at the table, presented with béarnaise sauce in a polished silver boat and a tower of golden, puffed pommes soufflés arranged on the side. At fine dining establishments across Manhattan and Miami Beach, this was a dish designed to be split between a couple celebrating an anniversary or 2 old friends catching up over a bottle of wine, and the price on the menu reflected exactly that intention. Gleason did not share. He sat across from company that had already finished their own dinners, or sometimes he sat entirely alone at a table set for 2, and he worked through the full tenderloin with the slow, methodical focus of a man who saw nothing unusual about what he was doing. Each slice was cut thick, laid flat on the warmed plate, and covered in a generous pour of the béarnaise. A properly portioned Chateaubriand contains enough prime beef to comfortably satisfy 3 or 4 ordinary appetites. Gleason treated it as his main course, with room left over for dessert, which he never skipped. The béarnaise sauce alone, a warm, rich emulsion of clarified butter, egg yolks, fresh tarragon shallots, and white wine vinegar, poured without restraint over every last slice, added enough richness to that single sitting to exceed what most people would consume in a full day. And when the last piece of beef was gone and the sauce boat sat empty, Gleason leaned back, lit a cigar, ordered a glass of scotch, and sat in the kind of satisfied quiet that only comes from a man who genuinely believes that what he has just done is perfectly normal. Number 8. Fried chicken by the bucket between scenes. During long production days on the Jackie Gleason show, Gleason kept buckets of freshly fried chicken within arm's reach at all times. Not a plate, not a box, full buckets. He ate drumsticks and thighs between scenes during lighting setups and while reviewing script changes with his writers. The chicken had to be hot and freshly fried, never reheated from an earlier batch, and production assistants were regularly dispatched to bring back more when the supply ran low. By the end of a full day of taping, the stack of empty containers told the story better than any witness could. Wardrobe had given up trying to keep the grease off his sleeves. Number 7. A dozen hot dogs from a Coney Island stand. Gleason never lost his Brooklyn roots, and one of his lifelong habits was eating hot dogs by the dozen. Not fancy restaurant frankfurters served on brioche with truffle mustard. Street vendor hot dogs, snapped into a soft bun, loaded with yellow mustard, sauerkraut, and diced raw onions, eaten standing up on the sidewalk or in the back seat of a car. He put them away with the speed and efficiency of a man in a competitive eating contest, except there was no contest, no crowd, no prize. There was only Gleason, a grease-spotted paper bag, and no intention whatsoever of stopping until the bag was empty. Number 6. Shrimp scampi, measured by the pound. Gleason's shrimp scampi was not ordered by the piece the way most diners order it. It was ordered by weight. He wanted pounds of large shrimp sautéed in garlic butter and white wine, heaped over a bed of linguine, with enough crusty bread on the side to turn the leftover garlic butter into a second course all by itself. The butter soaked through the bread and collected in golden pools at the bottom of the plate. He finished it all, mopped the plate clean with a final piece of crust, and then ordered an espresso as if the meal he had just consumed had been a light snack. The waiter cleared the table and found nothing left but an empty bread basket and a faint slick of garlic butter on the tablecloth. Number 5. Birthday cakes consumed alone after the party. Every year on February 26th, Gleason received elaborate, multi-tiered birthday cakes from friends, television studios, restaurant owners, and business associates. The cakes were displayed at parties, photographed, applauded, and sliced for guests. What most people never saw was what happened after the guests went home. Gleason took whatever remained of the cake, sometimes more than half, and finished it himself over the following day or two, standing at the kitchen counter at odd hours, cutting thick slabs and eating them directly off the knife. A cake designed for 40 people became a solitary project for one man, a fork, and silence. By the time the sun came up, the box on the counter held nothing but a smear of frosting and a few scattered crumbs. Number 4. Whole cheesecakes from Lindy's. Lindy's restaurant on Broadway was famous across New York for its dense, creamy cheesecake, and Gleason was among its most loyal and most destructive customers. He did not order by the slice. He ordered whole cheesecakes, uncut, boxed, and taken home. Over the course of a single evening, he could work through half a cake on his own, cutting thick wedges and eating them with his hands or a fork, depending on the hour and the mood. Each cheesecake was rich and heavy enough to function as a full meal. For Gleason, it was dessert, piled on top of a dinner that would have been more than enough for most people all by itself. The box never lasted until morning. Number 3. Steak and scotch against direct medical orders. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Gleason's doctors were telling him plainly and repeatedly that his eating and drinking were destroying his body from the inside. His heart was struggling under the weight. His liver had taken decades of punishment. His digestive system had been under constant siege for longer than most of his doctors had been practicing medicine. They laid it out for him in terms no one could misunderstand. His response was to sit down at his usual table and order another thick steak and another glass of scotch, because no physician on earth was going to tell Jackie Gleason how to live, how to eat, or when to stop. Number 2. The dinner parties at Inverrary. In his final years, living at the Inverrary Country Club in Lauderhill, Florida, Gleason hosted dinner parties that began at sundown and ran deep into the early morning hours. The long table was loaded end to end with Italian dishes, thick steaks, platters of seafood, baskets of bread, bottles of red wine, and a bottle of scotch that never seemed to empty. Gleason sat at the head of that table all night, eating steadily, telling jokes that brought the room to tears, and making sure no plate sat idle and no glass stayed dry. Guests who attended those evenings said they were the finest nights of their lives. They were also watching a man eat and drink himself into the ground, one glorious course at a time, with the widest smile in the room. Nobody said a word about it. Nobody wanted to be the one to break the spell. Number 1. The last meal nobody recorded. Jackie Gleason died on June 24, 1987 at the age of 71 from colon cancer and liver cancer, two diseases that decades of red meat, hard liquor, cigars, and a body pushed relentlessly past every warning sign had made all but inevitable. Nobody wrote down what his final real meal was. Nobody kept the plate or saved a menu card or thought to take a photograph of what was on the table. But everyone who had ever sat across from the man at any restaurant, any party, any backstage spread over the previous 40 years understood one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was on that last plate, it was too much, and it was exactly what Jackie Gleason wanted. He ate the way he performed, without apology, without moderation, without a single backward glance at the damage accumulating behind him. He filled every room he ever walked into, and the dining room was never the exception. His doctors had warned him for years. His friends had watched and said nothing because saying something to Gleason about food or drink was like telling the ocean to stop. His own body had been sending signals for more than a decade, signals that any other man would have answered with a salad and a glass of water. Gleason answered with a porterhouse and a double scotch. He chose the next plate every single time it was offered. The next glass. The next evening at a long table surrounded by food and laughter and people who could not imagine the room without him in it. Whether that was bravery or recklessness or something else entirely depends on who you ask and how well they knew him. But not one person who ever shared a meal with Jackie Gleason called his death a surprise. The food did not kill him. He killed himself. And he did it one wild, magnificent, completely unapologetic plate at a time. Jackie Gleason never once pretended to be a man of moderation, and every meal on this list proved it. If any of these stopped you cold, or reminded you of someone you used to know who lived the same way, put it in the comments, and if this is the kind of history that keeps you watching, hit subscribe and stay close, because there is plenty more where this came from.